one becomes more aware of the physical body, or one experiences what I call the concrete, tactile reality of the physical body. But the attention still remains on the area around the nostrils. Okay, somebody asks, does being aware of the long breath and short breath simply mean to be aware of the breaths as they are? Well, one is aware of the breaths as they are, but it seems here one is deliberately distinguishing whether the breath is long or whether it's short. Otherwise, it seems simply being aware of the breath as they are is indicated by the first phrase, ever mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Is it possible to enter jhana as early as the 4th step of the 16 steps, or does it happen at the end of the 9th step? Okay, this is a rather technical question. It seems to me, and this is a point I wanted to make anyway, that the first 3 tetrads, the first 3 12 steps, are looking at the same process from different points of view, from different perspectives, that they're each looking at the process of intensifying concentration, intensified samadhi. But the first tetrad is looking at it from the standpoint of the body, the second from the standpoint of feeling, the third from the standpoint of mind. And so I see, the way I look at it, that all 3 of these tetrads are looking at the process by which mindfulness of breathing is used to enter jhana, even though jhana is not explicitly mentioned in the suttas on mindfulness of breathing. So especially as the breathing becomes tranquilized, being aware of the tranquilizing the bodily formation, this indicates the tranquilizing of the breath as one approaches and enters the jhana and takes it up to the level of the 4th jhana, where the breathing becomes completely tranquilized. Okay, I want to move on now to the 2nd tetrad, which is, the way I look at it, as I said, it's now taking the process of mindfulness of breathing and looking at what is happening in terms of feeling. And we find this explicitly stated in the sutta on mindfulness of breathing, that's 118 of the Majjhima Nikaya. Okay, so now I shall breathe in, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe out, experiencing rapture. I shall breathe in, experiencing pleasure. I shall breathe out, experiencing pleasure. And so we have here 2 important words or 2 words that indicate important factors in the development of samadhi, or concentration. Okay, the two words are piti and sukha. Piti is what we translate as rapture. I'm not so happy with it, but it's hard to find an adequate rendering. Could be joy or elation. And technically, piti isn't classified as a feeling, but piti and sukha, the other word is sukha, which is rendered here as pleasure. These two these two mental factors often occur very closely associated, but piti is more like an exuberance of bliss, a kind of ecstatic feeling, an uplifting joy. And sukha is it is itself the feeling. It's the pleasant feeling. And so in the initial stage, piti and sukha, rapture and pleasure, occur together. But rapture is a more colorful character. It's like, if two women go to a dance and one is dressed in a red and green and blue dress, and the other comes in a pale yellow dress, then the one who's going to sort of stand out is the one wearing the red, green, and blue dress. And so all the eyes will be on her, and the one with the pale yellow dress will sort of be in the background, out of the center of attention. And so what first dominates in the experience of deepening meditation is this rapture. And so I think rapture is included in this section because it arises as the concentration, as the mind is becoming concentrated. Then when it's cleared, the hindrances are falling away and the mind is collected on the object, there arises this joy or this exuberance, and that becomes the center of attention. But one is still focusing on the breath, still aware of breathing in, breathing out, but now one is experiencing rapture as one is aware of breathing in and breathing out. Okay, as the concentration deepens and one becomes more familiar with it, then the rapture starts to fall away, to fade into the background. Maybe it's a little bit like those two women just enter the dance, the party. And so initially the one with the bright red and blue dress stands out, but if one chats with them and gets to know them a little bit, one finds the one with the pale yellow dress has a more interesting, a more deeper personality. Okay, so very worldly illustration. Okay, so as the mind becomes more concentrated, the rapture loses its interest, so to speak, and eventually it will subside as the jhanic experiences unfold. As one moves from the first jhana to the second, then from the second jhana to the third, in the transition from the second to the third, piti, or rapture, falls away, and there remains only the pleasure, the sukha, without the rapture. Okay, then in the third step, he trains, I shall breathe in, experiencing the mental formation. I shall breathe out, experiencing the mental formation. And then I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the mental formation. I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the mental formation. And here we come across the expression mental formation that Richard brought up before. This is Chitta Sankhara, and according to page 399, that we looked at a few moments ago, again, paragraph 15, perception and feeling are mental states bound up with the mind. That is why perception and feeling are the mental formation. So it's indicated by mental formation as perception and feeling. And since the process of meditation here isn't particularly concerned with perception, so it seems what's being focused on is the feeling. So one is breathing in, breathing out, experiencing the feeling. And I don't quite know why feeling is, or let's say the mental formation is mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, that puzzles me because the five skandhas usually list feeling, perception, and mental formation separately. And if feeling, perception are the mental formation, then why is the mental formation listed as
this is it's an interesting question about Pali terminology and how these words came to be understood. In the five aggregates, the aggregate of mental formations, or sankhara, are the factors connected with volition. It's chaitana, volition, the intentional factors. And perception and feeling, or feeling and perception, are the headings for other aggregates. But in this particular scheme, feeling and perception become the mental formation, the chitta sankhara.
Well, that surprises me because normally he's very consistent with these usages. Like he has this scheme that he applies very consistently, and that's.
Yeah, I have to say it's also. It's puzzling to me. I don't have the answer to it. Unless he was picking up terms that were sort of in usage in the contemplative communities of that period. But then why use a word in one context in which it has one application, and then in another context in which it has another application? I just don't have the answer.
Could it be a corruption of the text?
No, I don't think so, because we find that the use of these words consistent between different Nikayas, and so it seems to be pretty, deliberate. It could be a corruption. The corruption would just mean like a bad reading, which one could find maybe in one text, and then one could see that it's a corruption because of other texts which give different readings. Okay, so it seems to me anyway that here, if mental formation is taken as feeling, that it's being used in a broader sense. It's not just the pleasure, but it could be the pleasant feeling and also the feeling of equanimity or the neutral feeling. So it's all comprised under the heading of mental formation. And maybe here also, even when it's a pleasant feeling, when one is experiencing it, one is not attending to it under the heading of being pleasant or pleasurable, but rather just experiencing it as a feeling. And then in the next step, one is tranquilizing the mental formation. And that means one is through continuing to focus on in and out breathing, one is making the feeling become subtler and subtler. So the pleasant feeling moves from, the approach to the jhana. When one enters into the jhana, it's subtler than it was earlier. When one comes to the second jhana, it's still a subtler feeling of pleasure. When one comes to the third jhana, it's an extremely subtle feeling of pleasure. When one comes to the fourth jhana, then the pleasant feeling subsides and it's replaced by neutral feeling or equanimous feeling. So this is tranquilizing the mental formation. Okay, now we come to the third tetrad, and this is looking at the process of mindfulness of breathing from the perspective of citta, or the mind. And so the first one is, I shall breathe in, I shall breathe out, experiencing the mind. The Pali word here, the Pali expression. Citta pati samvedi. And all along, as one is doing mindfulness of breathing, of course the mind is always present. Without the mind being present, one couldn't be mindful of the breath. But what seems to be indicated here is that at a certain point, the mind itself, the citta, as a component of the experience, becomes more prominent. Initially, one is just trying to keep the mind on the breath, coming in, going out, coming in, going out. But now one is becoming aware of the mind as a factor involved in that experience. And perhaps one is also becoming more aware of the mental factors. One could see when a particular hindrance arises in the mind, or a particular quality of the mind, that the mind is connected with attachment, with ill will, with delusion, or that the mind, as it's becoming more mindful, the mind is separating from attachment, separating from ill will, separating from delusion. So one has become more aware of the quality of the mind and the factors that are operating in the mind. Okay, then the second stage, I shall breathe in, gladdening the mind. I shall breathe out, gladdening the mind. Okay, this seems to indicate that as one's concentration on the mind is increasing, and the mind is becoming, or is able to sustain its attention more consistently on the breath, then what is arising is piti and sukha. That is, it's the rapture and pleasure arising. And that is what is causing the gladdening of the mind. But when we take rapture and pleasure, we're looking at it from the standpoint of feeling. But when we take it from the standpoint of mind, then we speak about the gladdening of the mind. The mind is being suffused with rapture and with pleasure. Okay, then the next step, I shall breathe in, I shall breathe out, concentrating the mind. Okay, this is what one has been attempting to do all along. And as the rapture and pleasure arise, gladdening the mind, this is a kind of indication that the mind is becoming more concentrated. But if one becomes sort of attracted or latches on to the rapture and the pleasure, then the mind becomes distracted, loses the object. And so what one has to do is sort of let the rapture, let the pleasure take their own course and just continue to focus on the in and out breathing. And as one does so, the mind becomes more concentrated, the concentration deepens, and then one as the concentration deepens, then one enters into the meditative absorptions, the jhanas. Okay, then comes the fourth step. I shall breathe in, liberating the mind. I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. Now the way the commentaries explain this, and here I would agree with them, liberating the mind here doesn't mean completely eradicating the defilements in order to reach final liberation. But rather, what it means is one is releasing or letting go of the coarser mental states in order to enter upon subtler levels of concentration. So initially, in the preliminary stages of training, one has to liberate the mind by letting go the 5 hindrances, by freeing the mind from the 5 hindrances. Then, to deepen the concentration, one has to let go of, as one lets go of the 5 hindrances, then one comes into the first jhana. But then to move to the deeper jhanas, one has to liberate the mind first from thinking and examination, which are factors of the first jhana. Then one has to liberate the mind from rapture to move from the second to the third jhana. And then one has to liberate the mind from pleasure to move from the third jhana to the fourth jhana. So this is not the full or final liberation of mind that occurs through wisdom, through insight or wisdom, but this is releasing the mind from the coarser, grosser mental factors in order to allow the mind to move to the subtler factors in order to deepen the samadhi, the concentration. Okay, now I'm going to have to go a bit quickly in order to finish the whole sutta. I have to apologize for being a bit concise. Okay, now the fourth tetrad, the way I understand it, marks a significant shift in emphasis. In the first 3 tetrads, the emphasis is on samadhi, on concentration, or on samatha, on stilling the mind, or tranquilizing the mind. The fourth tetrad shifts the emphasis to insight. Here one is using mindfulness of breathing as a vehicle for contemplating the nature of experience in order to gain insight into the 3 characteristics. And so the text begins with, actually the first 3 sections are all focusing on the mark of impermanence, but under different headings. So here it starts, I shall breathe in, contemplating impermanence. I shall breathe out, contemplating impermanence. Okay, so what one does is one shifts the awareness from simply focusing upon the area where one experiences the breath coming in or going out, one shifts the emphasis from that particular spot to the actual occurrence of the in-breaths and the out-breaths themselves. And so one notices when breathing in, one identifies this is an in-breath. When breathing out, one becomes aware this is an out-breath. And so one starts to see now the distinction of in-breaths, out-breaths, in-breaths, out-breaths. And one sees that when the in-breath is occurring, there's no more out-breath. When the in-breath is stopped, the out-breath is occurring. That is an out-breath. And so one is seeing how in-breath, out-breath succeed one another. When one stops, the other starts. And so this is now getting a focus on impermanence. And as one focuses in more subtly, one sees in each in-breath how the breathing is occurring in stages, so that one starts to breathe in, then one comes into the middle phase of the in-breath, one comes to the end phase of the in-breath. Each stage is distinct from the other. And one sees the stopping moment of the in-breath, and then one sees the starting moment of the out-breath, the middle phase of the out-breath, the terminal phase of the out-breath, the pause at the end of the out-breath. And so each phase is distinct from the other. And then the attention can focus in more and more at subtler and subtler levels until one sees in each in-breath the breath occurring in sort of little quantum packets, moment after moment after moment, each moment distinct from the preceding moment. And similarly with the out-breath, one sees it as a stream of packets of out-breathing. Each is occurring, each has its arising and passing away. And so one is now seeing at very subtle levels arising and passing away in each in-breath and each out-breath. Then coming to the next stage, I shall breathe in contemplating viraga, fading away. I shall breathe out contemplating fading away. The way I see this is that one is now shifting the attention from the arising and passing away to now just focusing on the passing away aspect, or the dissolution of each packet of experience in the in-breath, in the out-breath. And so countless times as one is breathing in, that experience of the bodily act of breathing in and the awareness of breathing in is passing away, fading away, ceasing, or dissolving. And with each out-breath, countless times, the bodily act of breathing, the mental awareness, is breaking up, dissolving away. So that is contemplating fading away in the out-breath, in the in-breath, in the out-breath. Then the next pair, I shall breathe in contemplating cessation, I shall breathe out contemplating cessation. Okay, the way I see it here, as one is breathing in, one sees that each packet of experience has ceased. From moment to moment that it ceased, it doesn't exist with the next moment. And so here one is getting the most powerful experience of impermanence, because one is seeing how each experience, when a new experience occurs, the previous moment of experience is gone, it's stopped, it's past. And so this is becoming the most vivid, the most powerful experience of impermanence through seeing the cessation of every occasion of experience. And then comes the fourth stage, fourth aspect, which is breathing in, contemplating relinquishment, breathing out, contemplating relinquishment. And this is the relinquishing of any kind of attachment that occurs as through the contemplation of the impermanence, fading away, and cessation. As one is contemplating this, one is giving up the attachment or the defilements. Okay, so this takes us through, rather quickly, through the 16 stages or aspects of mindfulness of breathing. And then the Buddha just summarizes, and he says, that is how mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, so that it is of great fruit and great benefit. And then he adds an extra benefit. He says, when mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths are known as they cease, not unknown. So what this means is that if one is experienced in developing mindfulness of breathing, then as one enters into one's final moments, the death process, one could turn the attention to the breath, the in and out breath, and one can be aware of one's in-breaths and out-breaths as they are occurring right up to the moment that one comes to the final end of the breathing process. So one could pass away in complete mindfulness of the breath. Okay, let's see if there's internet questions. I'll take them now, and then in-house questions we could take for the discussion period. Okay, if mental formation also means volition and will, maybe tranquilizing the mental formation means paying attention to letting go of ego's willfulness at the 8th step. Still, I think here in the context of the explanation of mindfulness and breathing, we have to take the expression mental formation. Of course, it could mean will also, but usually in meditative context it's explained as perception and feeling. But maybe we could also include will in there and say tranquilizing perception, feeling, and willfulness. Okay, then some say that piti or rapture is physical and sukha is mental. Is this correct? I don't think I've heard this before, but they're both mental, but piti, rapture, can maybe expresses itself in certain physical manifestations, like they can take place when piti is occurring. Sometimes people get goosebumps, or we call it the hair standing on edge, or maybe feelings of like a coolness or heat rising and spreading through the body. But as a mental factor, it's actually, in its essence, it's actually a mental factor, that experience of joy or exuberance. Okay, we'll end the actual class now. We break for the lunch, and if anybody has more questions, please, we will meet again, let's say 10 after 12, quarter after 12, and we could have 20, 30-minute discussion. And then just to repeat, for the next 2 weeks, we won't have a class, the 24th and the December 31st. The next class will be on January 7th. And next time we will do it's called the Malakya Putta Sutta, the larger discourse to Malakya Putta. That's number 64 in the Majjhima Nikaya. Okay, so let us end by sharing the merits, sharing with the devas, the deities, the nagas, the dragon spirits, the Bhutas, or the fierce beings, asking them to rejoice in the merits, to protect the Buddha's teachings, to protect the world, to protect ourselves and others. Akasata Chumata Deva Naga Mahitika Punyanta Nanumoditva Chiram Rakantu Sasanam. Akasata Chumata Deva Naga Mahitika Punyanta Nanumoditva Chiram Rakantu Desanam. Akasata Chumata Deva Naga Mahedika Punyanta Anumoditva Chirang rakantu mam param. Eta vatacham hehi sampadam punya sampadam. Sabbe devanamodantu. Sabba sampati siddhya. Sabbe bhutanamodantu. Sabba sampati siddhya. Sabbe sadhanumodantu. Sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichihitato. Etantare satakayupapanna. Rupya rupicha. Asanya sanino. Dukkha pamuchantu. Pusantu nibbuttim. And I wish everybody a happy Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Okay, we stand up and we end with 3 short comments.